Hello and welcome. I'm Homer Kraut, and today we'll be talking about process benchmarking. In order to be competitive in today's global market, you must maintain and improve the quality of your product and reduce cost. Benchmarking is an interesting concept. It's been around for a long time, and most of us have extensive personal experience in benchmarking. Some examples. Cars are compared in terms of quality, gas mileage, comfort. This is a form of benchmarking. We are comparing similar items to determine requirements based on needs and in terms of quality that each product delivers. That's benchmarking. Education. As we move through an educational system, we tend to shop around for an education that best suits our needs, either in terms of output, in terms of quality, or in terms of price. That's benchmarking. Another example would be that I personally prefer Diet Coke, and I prefer coffee that meets a specific brand and taste. In each case, I have internalized or externalized a process into some sort of a benchmark for me. What you're doing when you compare products, when you look at a product, is benchmarking. As I noted, all of you have had experience in benchmarking. It's not a new thought. What we may do is apply some new concepts and give you ways to think about this in terms of a product that your company is involved in producing. Benchmarking is a continuous process for comparing the performance of your organization against that of others, aiming to not only match, but to exceed those performance levels. We're going to spend some time with some general thoughts, talk about benchmarking specifically, look at some benchmarking projects, spend some time talking about why some benchmarking projects fail and why some are successful. And then we'll take a look at a checklist for success. General thoughts on benchmarking. When you're benchmarking, you need to focus on facts. You need to collect data, form it into information, and make informed decisions based on facts. You must create a consensus on reality and targets. Too often, we put things in the I wish I category. I wish I'd have done this, or I wish we could do this. Too often, we look at a product and take things off of our wish list that are very impractical in terms of dollars, times, or resources in order to do that. You need to be real or have a reality check about what you're going to do with your particular product as you're benchmarking. Facilitate and accelerate change. Most of us do not care to change very quickly. Most organizations have a way to do things, and they have products that are reliable and they can depend on. It's very difficult to change, in particular to change a product where the outcome is uncertain. However, if you're benchmarking and if you're thinking that you're going to change a product, you must be in a position to facilitate and accelerate change. In today's world, if you decide to move a new product to the market and you don't do it rapidly, someone will do it before you do. You must try to identify leaps in performance. If you're benchmarking, maybe what you want to do is to improve a product or a process that you have. What you try to do is, instead of moving from 1 to 2 to 3 in gradual increments. It would be nice if you could look at your particular product and identify a leap that would take shorter amount of time, less resources, and give you a product that was more saleable. As you move through a benchmarking process, you must monitor the progress. You must keep track of what's happening and what you're doing. Sustained competitive advantage. What benchmarking does is to keep you competitive in today's market and today's world. You are trying to continually compete with other corporations or companies that are designing, building, and implementing the same kinds of products that you are. What you're trying to do is to stay in the market. Have individuals buy your product more than they buy someone else's. Best practices. Best practices are based on successful methods. You find a product that is being sold or maybe number one on the market, and what you try to do is to base what practices that you have on the same that they do for that particular product. Best practices are also proven in practice. You look back over time and things that have been done over time that have been successful have been proven. You're more than welcome to step to the edge of the cliff in implementing a new product using a new technology or a brand new thought process. However, if you want to be successful over time and have a good product, you really should design and benchmark based on those thoughts and processes that have been proven over time. Adapt it for your own operational needs. You really need to, when you start benchmarking and looking at best practices, you need to think about what you need. Most processes and products in the way that they're produced will not fit your organizational needs out of the box. What you need to do is adapt those for the needs that you have and with your particular organization. And we'll address this a little bit later. In the failure and success area, those things that will make you more of a success are where you've adapted or adopted products and best practices to suit your particular company needs. Types of benchmarking: diagnostic, holistic, and process. Diagnostic is looking at a production or a process in detail. You diagnose in detail and you look at what is happening over time. In a holistic approach, you look at the whole item and then begin to digress and look at parts of it as the individual pieces of it. An example of holistic would be reverse engineering. You see a product, you see what it does as a whole, and then you reverse engineer it to see how individual components contribute to the whole over time, and to see if you could duplicate that or create a similar product. Process benchmarking. You look at processes as they contribute to the end product. Then you evaluate individual processes. There are several other kinds of things that you can look at in this particular area. You can look internal, similar occupations or similar operations with your own organization. Look at competitors and see what you think is the best and not so best. It's also easy to learn, or you can also learn things from individuals who have products that don't meet the same standards and quality that yours do. Why do they not meet that? How did they get there? You don't want to go backwards, but it doesn't hurt to look at it and evaluate that. Functional. If you have a functional process in your industry or you'd like to improve a functional process, look outside of the industry. It may be that there's another industry that's similar or maybe not even related to yours that use a similar process that will allow you to improve yours. As you begin the benchmarking process, you need to ask some questions. What do we want to benchmark? You need to very specifically design or very specifically ask or very specifically state what you're attempting to benchmark and what the goals for this are. If you decide or if you think that you'd like to benchmark, then you should look around and see what partners that you should find. Are there organizations that are similar to yours? Are there organizations in competition with you? What you need to do is to look out and ask. All you can do when you look for a partner is to ask and say, we would like to see what you're doing to see if there's a way that we can improve our processes. In general, those companies that are selling a good product have good processes, and you need to look at them and see who has excellent processes. Then you attempt to partner with them. You look at how are you going to do this process. You look at how well do the process of others perform. You must spend some time answering these questions as you move into the benchmarking process. Now let's take a look at benchmarking itself. Note that there's a flow to this particular slide. It's a benchmarking flow. We plan, we design the project around key business issues. We collect and identify best practices and collect data. We analyze, we compare the performance and identify areas for improvement. We adapt. We implement best practice and monitor a project. Please note that this is a cyclic type of flow. You plan, collect, analyze, and adapt. And in each case, you can plan and collect. If you find that you haven't collected data that meets your plan, you would move back to the planning stage. Again, the same with here. You do an analysis, found that you haven't collected the data that you need, and you collect again. It's a cyclic process. We'll take a look at each of these areas in some detail. Planning phase. First thing that you need to do is to form a benchmark team. The team is the element that will move your desires, your goals, to a completed outcome. You must document your process. You must establish a scope of the benchmarking study. You must spend time defining very clearly what the outcomes of the project should be. You must develop a purpose statement and objectives. You must develop criteria for partners and identify who those partners will be, as well as criteria. And at this point, you try to determine your data collection plan. What these will do is to give you the necessary tools to move in to your collection phase. The second step is to collect the data or the information that you need. Secondary research based on selection sort criteria. Not only do you collect data and information from within your organization, but you do research to find out what other organizations have similar processes. And you look at what they've collected and what kind of information that they can provide. You take a look at the research and evaluate the results and identify potential partners. This is a fallout of collecting data and doing secondary research. You must develop a data collection instrument. In this particular area, what you should try to do is to see if there's an instrument out there that currently collects the kind of data that you need to have collected. What you do is to pilot the data collection instruments internally and see if they meet your needs. One of the aspects that you need to do at this particular phase is that you need to determine how you're going to collect the data. And in today's world, it's probably some sort of a technology-based solution. And in general, you're better off collecting as much data as you can up front, and then you can discard data. Too often we find ourselves looking for data that we should have collected and did not as we move through a project. We're still talking about collection of data. We identify and contact the best practice partners and enlist participation. This can be a lengthy process. In general, this is done in an informal fashion prior to the time that you decide to formalize it. If you know that there's a company that you've approached informally that says, or an organization that says, we would welcome partnering with you, then you may want to move in this direction. But make sure that they meet the criteria that you need for standardization and quality of product. You must screen your partners and evaluate. As noted, some of these may be partners of opportunity that you've worked and established with over time. But you really should try to choose a partner that would challenge you in terms of improving your bottom line, your output, or a process. You need to develop detailed questionnaire on-site visits. As you go to your prospective partners, you need to ask questions and determine what detail that you need in terms of answers. If they're not willing to be a part of this process, then you may have made a mistake in considering that particular partner. You should conduct a detailed investigation, your questionnaire on site, and telephone follow-up. This part of the process, the collection phase, is for you to collect information, data, and the necessary background that will allow you to make an informed decision during the analysis phase. Now what you need to do is to compare your current performance data to your partner's data. Is the data that you are doing in terms of benchmarking the same as theirs? Are there differences? Are there similarities? Are there ways that you can make the two meet or not meet so that you can gain some information or leverage out of it? Identify operational best practices and enablers. What makes them do things better? In what ways do they do things not as well as you do? So you need to identify across the board those things that you see in your benchmarking partner that will make your operation better or make your operation at least marginally better. Formulate an implementation strategy. Once you've determined what best practices you'd like to put into place, then you have to decide how you're going to implement those. This is a critical aspect. Too often we begin to implement practices without lots of thought as to how they will impact on an organization. This change or potential for change can have a tremendous impact on both the organization, the employees, and the products that you are producing. You must also develop an implementation plan. It must be understood by those that are implementing it. It must be clear as to what you're trying to implement, and it must be detailed as to the steps in which they're implemented. Now that we have a plan, we'd like to adapt it. So you implement the plan. In general, what you're doing is bringing people together, moving them towards the objectives and the outcomes of the plan so that you can improve your processes or those benchmarking aspects of improvement that you've decided to implement. As part of adapting, you need to monitor and report progress. This must be done on a continual basis. Recalibrate and recycle the study. This is another cyclic process. You must spend time looking at how the plan is being implemented. Are the reports you're receiving indicate that what you intended for this particular process to do or this particular change to do, is it in fact creating or implementing a change that you need? You must look at this, and where there are differences, you must decide what those are, must decide how to correct them if they need to be corrected. And as part of the process, you need to plan for continuous improvement. This is critical. If you're going to benchmark, if you're going to improve a product, if you're going to move forward over time, you must make this whole process cyclic in nature. It's never finished. You implement a plan, you continually evaluate the plan, you recalibrate as necessary, and then you try to improve what you're already doing. Again, it's a continuous process. But let's take a look at benchmarking projects. Some basic considerations: reciprocity, analogy, metrics, understanding, and correctness. The kinds of things that you're answering or the kinds of questions that you're answering with this particular process are these basic considerations. What do each of the partners gain from the process? That's reciprocity. What are they gaining and what are you gaining? Are there analogies for the process? Do they need to be duplicated? Maybe if you've gone outside of your organization to look for a process, is there an analogy that you can use? Are there workarounds if there's an analogy that you can't use? Metrics, what do you need to collect? By what standard do you need to collect these? Everyone must have a clear understanding of what is expected and what are the outcomes supposed to be. The last question you should be asking yourself, is this correct? And is it correct for our company? Benchmarking partners. In order to partner, you need to know your own process first. And you need to know your process in detail. You need to know where the potential flaws are, where it's strong, and you must have a detailed, wide understanding of what your process is first. Identify key areas of activity. Within your processes, you must identify key areas. You're going to know your process inside and out, and then what you'd like to be able to do is to identify key areas of activity. Now, what you may find as you move into partnership, you may find that what you consider a key area of activity is not the same that your partner does, or maybe your partner does that activity better, or maybe not as well as you do. But once you've considered those key activities, those are the things that you would focus on in setting up or working with a partner. Brainstorming among yourselves. You need to spend time brainstorming. You need to look at what you're trying to do in a team environment and just brainstorm. Get ideas about what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. Ask for those things that may be outside of the box so that when you begin to work with a partner, you've explored as many possibilities, many avenues, and as many ideas as your organization or you as a team are capable of exploring. And then it wouldn't hurt to brainstorm with your team, with your partner, and do the same process. Lots of good comes out of this. If at the end of a brainstorming session you say, we are doing things very well, then that's fine, but at least you've gone through the process. Benchmarking clubs and organizations. There are lots of organizations out there that benchmark or support benchmarking. Explore, research, look at them, ask questions, ask for resources. A lot of the resources that they provide are free and yours for the asking. When you begin to work with a partner, you have to ask yourself, what's in it for them? What are they going to get out of it? It's the same question that you should be asking yourself. What am I going to get out of this particular project? And if you can't answer that, you need to spend time looking at it and answering, what am I going to get out of this particular process or this particular partnership, as well as what they're going to do. Failure and success. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about what causes projects to fail and why they succeed. As I created this slide, I almost moved success to be in front of failure. Unfortunately, most projects fail rather than succeed. In general, there are 3 criteria for a successful project. It must be completed on time, must be completed within budget, and it must meet the requirements. If you look at any sort of a project organization that collects data on failed and successful projects, most of them will tell you that more than 70% of projects fail to meet one of those particular criteria. Failure and success causes. Why do they fail? Own processes are not properly documented. As you move through this process, you're supposed to collect information, data that goes into information, and you must document in detail your own processes so that when you go to a partner or a potential partner, you can look at what they do and what you do, make comparisons, and make a determination where you can improve your processes. If you don't document, if you don't collect data that you can use for information, you haven't done what you need to do in order to make a fair comparison. Too often, the performance gap is not identified. What's expected of a product in terms of requirements and what the actual outcome is what is expected. And a good example is fuel mileage. If you buy an automobile, what they tell you on the sticker for gas mileage is generally not what you wind up getting. There is a performance gap there. And while it's stated by the company that produces the car, that gap is not identified in general. Scope of the project is to be deep, broad versus deep. Broad is in the sense that you've set up a project to look at too much. There are too many varying different items that you look at. Deep in the sense that you've tried to go down into too much detail into a particular task that you're trying to benchmark. So you need to be very careful in that when you select the scope of a project, that you make it neither too broad nor too deep. One of the things that you can do, or you should do as part of the planning process, is to very clearly identify what you're looking at and where it's supposed to go. Not learning from what's available. Why would you reinvent the wheel? If you do your research, there'll be information out there or literature out there that shows what other people have tried and whether it works or not. Now, what it may not do where it's successful is to tell you how they've succeeded or what they're doing to succeed, but at least it puts you into the right side of the ballpark, or at least into the right direction for succeeding. Another reason for failure, lack of management support. Too often management says, make this better, and then for whatever reason, politics, resources, they don't follow through on this and support it. If your management does not support your process or your product or what you're attempting to do, it will probably fail. Refusing to see and believe. Too often we see what is happening, but we refuse to believe that it's contributing to the success of a product or a project. We need to look at what we see, collect facts, and even though it may seem improbable, you need to base your decision on facts. Okay. Let's take a look at the success side. This is a little more positive. Senior management as process owners. Senior management is involved in the process. You probably see them on a daily basis or a weekly basis. They come and ask. So senior management has taken charge of this and accepts the fact that ultimately they are responsible for a project. They give you the support that you need, they provide you with the resources that you need, and allow you to move forward over time. Concept of continuous improvement in place. There is a plan out there that allows for continuous improvement. The team that is working on this project understands the benchmarking process and is functioning as a team to reach an achievable goal and outcome. Timing is right. Often, benchmarking projects are set up in the heat of the moment. A manager will see something that is good, or see a product that is better than theirs, or see something that they think is a good idea, and they will start into a benchmarking process, and the timing is not right. So there has to be timing for this. And this is one of those areas that if you spend some time planning, that you can make the time right. Okay, how do we make our benchmark project a success? This is a checklist or some things that you can check off for success of a project that you may be working on. As noted before, the project has top management commitment. They have allocated resources in terms of time, personnel, and budget in order for this to be moved forward towards a successful completion. The project focuses on key business issues. It's not off task. We focus on issues that supports the organization, supports a successful outcome, supports a good product, and one that can bring revenue back into a company. Project supports overall business improvement strategy. Most businesses have long-range plans, generally maybe a 1-year, 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, 20-year plan that's revised every year. And the benchmarking project that they're working on, or you're working on, supports this overall improvement strategy. This is a critical area. Whatever you do must support what the business is doing over time. Project demonstrates that benefits outweigh the cost. Anything that you do over time must bring in money. There are few projects that are allowed to go forward where the profit line is going to be negative when you're finished. As noted earlier, the project allocates the necessary resources, both time, budget, personnel. People involved have the necessary knowledge, and outcomes are measurable. You must be able to measure what a team or a benchmarking project is expected to do. You have to have a plan to show what is to be benchmarked. The plan shows how and from where data would be collected. We spent some time talking about this, but it's critical that you collect as much data as you need so that you can provide the information that would necessarily support moving into the benchmark arena. A benchmarking plan should show how and where best practices can be identified. It defines how to monitor the implementation of best practices. It should clearly identify where best practices could be applied within your company. A benchmarking plan shows a clear time scale for each step. You must be able to identify the time frame in which a plan takes place, the resources that are necessary, and what it's going to cost. A plan should predict the best and the worst case results. As you make a plan and you say that the best outcome would be that we'll increase our product by 30% or our profit by X%, you should also identify the worst case. And it may be that if the worst case far outweighs the best case and the risks are too high, then you may not choose to benchmark. But at least you should have identified those areas in which that would take place. Benchmarking plan defines a review of achievements. What it does is says, what did you do and how you did it over time? We've taken a look at benchmarking factors. We looked at what you would use to determine and set up benchmarking for your particular company. We looked at types and best practices. Talked about how you would set up partnerships, what you need to consider as setting up partnerships, and where you would go to find a partner that would be, or the criteria that you would use for finding a partner that would assist you in implementing best practices. Benchmarking is a planning process in as of itself, and benchmarking has a plan. Success and failure reasons. We took a quick look at success and failure reasons. How you could look at fail and success and use that to implement good practices within your company. And finally, we took at some benchmark checklists for success. We looked at those items that you could consider that you could use for benchmarking that would support the effort in your particular company. If you have questions about the lesson or you need additional information, please visit the university website.